The journey began with anticipation and excitement as the sun rose on the horizon. I felt a sense of adventure and a desire to explore the unknown. I had heard tales of the wonders that lay ahead, and I was determined to experience them for myself. With a deep breath, I set off on my journey, ready to discover the secrets of the wilderness. After a long and arduous journey, I finally arrived at the meeting point. As I looked around, I noticed a tall, imposing figure standing in the shadows. He was my guide, and he beckoned me forward. I nervously approached him. And he introduced himself as Rufus. He was an experienced guide and had been traveling the same route for many years. He was friendly and welcoming, and soon had me feeling at ease. We discussed the journey ahead, and he showed me the supplies he had brought for us, with a final nod of understanding. I knew I was ready to set off on my adventure. After meeting the guide, the adventurers set off on their journey. They were filled with anticipation as they prepared for the days ahead. The guide took them through the forestry, pointing out the various wildlife and plants along the way. The sun shone brightly, and the birds sang as they made their way through the trees. As they traveled, they discussed the challenges that lay ahead and the plans they had made for the journey. They were excited to see what the future would bring, and they all felt a sense of adventure. After a few hours of walking, they finally reached the river that marked the start of their journey. The group gathered their belongings and prepared for their journey across the river. The guide explained the importance of being careful and mindful while crossing the water, as the current could be unpredictable. He warned them to be aware of any hidden obstacles that may be lurking beneath the surface. After a few minutes of preparation, the group began their journey across the river. Despite the strong current, they managed to make it safely to the other side upon arriving. They were relieved and thankful for the guidance of their guide. The first night of the journey was a strange and exciting experience. After crossing the river, the group set up camp and made a fire to keep warm. Everyone was exhausted from the journey so far, but the anticipation of what lay ahead kept everyone awake. The stars twinkled brightly in the night sky, and the sound of the river rushing nearby provided a comforting background noise. Everyone shared stories of their experiences so far and discussed their hopes for the journey ahead, despite the fatigue. The group was in high spirits and ready to continue the journey the next day. The adventurers arose early the next morning. The sun just beginning to peek over the horizon. They had a long and difficult climb ahead of them, and they were determined to make the most of it, with their guide leading the way. They began their ascent. The terrain was rough and unforgiving, and the adventurers had to be careful not to slip or stumble. But they kept going, determined to reach the summit with each step. They felt their excitement and anticipation growing. The journey had truly begun. As the climb continued, the terrain became increasingly difficult. Rocks and roots became obstacles to contend with, and the incline of the mountain grew steeper with every step. The hiker had to be extra careful to ensure their footing was secure and that they kept their balance. The air was thinning, and the hiker's breath was becoming labored. The sun was beating down on them, and sweat was pouring off their body. The hiker was beginning to feel the strain of the climb, but they pushed on, determined to reach the summit. The climb was becoming increasingly difficult and treacherous with each step. The danger of slipping or falling increased. The terrain was steep and rocky, with sharp drops on either side. The air was becoming thinner, and the weather was becoming more unpredictable. There were no guardrails or ropes to help keep climbers safe, and the lack of visibility due to the fog and clouds made it even more difficult to navigate. The risk of getting lost or injured was very real. The danger of the climb was becoming more and more apparent with each step. The climb had been difficult, but the storm made it even harder. The wind blew fiercely, and the rain poured down, making it difficult to see or stay. Balance. The temperature had dropped drastically, and the cold was biting. The thunder was deafening, and the lightning was blinding. The storm had brought with it a sense of danger and fear. Despite this, the climbers pressed on, determined to reach the summit. After a long and treacherous climb, we finally reached the summit. The view was breathtaking, and the sense of accomplishment was overwhelming. Despite the danger and exhaustion of the climb, the feeling of success was worth it. All we had achieved something that many had not, and the feeling of accomplishment was a reward in itself. We had conquered the mountain, and the journey was complete. The adventurers had reached the peak of their climb. But the storm had made the final stretch more difficult than expected. With determination and resilience, they pushed on until it ceased. Despite the exhaustion and danger, the rain and wind made visibility difficult, but they pushed ever forward, refusing to give up until they reached the summit. After what seemed like an eternity, they finally reached the top, and the sense of accomplishment was palpable. After the final push of the climb, the view from the top was breathtaking. The sun shone brightly, illuminating the vast landscape that stretched out before us. We could see for miles, taking in the beauty of the mountains. Now, it is so, valleys and lakes that surrounded us after months of planning and preparation. And the feeling of accomplishment was overwhelming. We had reached the summit, and the view from the top was worth every step of the journey. The final push had been a difficult one, but the reward for reaching the top was worth it. The view from the summit was breathtaking, With a panoramic vista of the surrounding landscape, the feeling of accomplishment was palpable, and the sense of pride and joy was overwhelming. After taking a moment to savor the moment, the group began to make their way down the mountain, looking forward to the reward that awaited them. At the bottom, Xinxiao. After the hard-earned reward of reaching the summit, the journey home begins. This part of the journey is often the most difficult, as the fatigue of the climb sets in and the long descent awaits. The descent is often more arduous than the climb itself, requiring focus and determination to stay on course. As the path winds down the mountain, the scenery changes, and the feeling of accomplishment slowly grows. The landscape is a reminder of the journey taken and the hard work put in to reach the summit. After hours of descending, the trail eventually leads back to the starting point, and the journey home is complete. The experience of reaching the summit and returning safely is a feeling of accomplishment that can never be taken away. After the long, arduous journey home, the climber felt a sense of relief and accomplishment, having reached the summit and experienced a view from the top. The climber was now ready to go back to their life. The return was a time to reflect on the journey, the lessons learned, and the memories made despite the fatigue. The climber was grateful for the opportunity to have gone on such a journey, and was looking forward to the next challenge.
If you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss an update from us. We'll be bringing you more exciting stories and videos like this one. See you next time.